Hey there, it is Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Radcliffe.
All right, we're going to talk about it because we want to. These guys have a book. It's called Faithful Grandparenting, Practical Ideas for Connecting Generations. Becky Danielson and Carol Olsen. Becky does not have grandchildren yet, like Dan and I. We're still waiting.
Still waiting. If you're listening, we're still waiting.
Carol made her kids drink this special water or something because she's a grandmother of 8. Carol, Becky, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having us.
Great. We're happy to have you. We thank you for covering this topic. And I know there's so many dynamics to what you're going to talk about. We won't be able to touch on all of them today. We'd love to have you back and talk about more. But first of all, I want to know the conversation that started it all. Whose idea and how did you get there? Because like I mentioned, Carol has 8, Becky, like Dan and I, 0. How did this all begin? Carol?
Well, Becky and I became friends years and years ago when we worked on children's ministry at our church. And we just sort of enjoyed being together. And then we both are parent educators. So we have both worked very much with families and with children and with the idea of parenting. And so the more we work together, the more we got to say, hey, we do have some really interesting things. And there is a need out there. Working with families, we can say, sometimes there are some real difficulties. So we wanted to do this. We also are in a group of women that really supported us. It's a Christian group that we do a lot of studies together. And they kept saying, gosh, we're just becoming grandparents. We're at that age now to become grandparents. What should we do? What can we do? How can we work with our kids to help them to have better relationships and also to find the Lord? So Becky, you can add more to that.
No, you summed it up well. I think having that support from friends and then also seeing a need, being that we've worked with families for so many years, that intergenerational piece is really, really important. So in a toolbox for grandparents, I mean, faithful grandparenting, the subtitle sums the whole thing up. It's practical ideas for connecting the generations. And that's exactly what it is. It's over 250 ideas for grandparents to take and run with, and then more support online.
Now, just the importance of being grandparents. I mean, I know when I grew up, I didn't live near my grandparents, so I didn't get to see them very often. And to me, they were always, older. I didn't understand them. They didn't understand me. But grandparents can have such a huge impact in kids' lives in more ways than even parents can. And this is so important. So talk about the importance of being there as a grandparent.
I'll let you start, Becky.
Okay. My grandmother was an amazing woman. She lived to be 101. We all called her Kit Kat. She did not want to be called grandmother,
I love it.
Mimi, all of these other things. So she was Kit Kat prior to the candy bar. So she would follow it up with that. And she was a tremendous influencer on my life. Not only the everyday things, but in my faith. I stayed with her. I saw her writing in her Bible, which was incredibly novel to me. She would pray. My mother's an only child. So she'd start with my mom at the top of the list, then my dad, and then the 3 of us. And then when my siblings and I were married, she'd add on my siblings, spouses, and my spouse, and then all the great-grandchildren. She'd pray for us all by name and by birth date, so she'd remember. She never forgot a birthday up to 101. I think having a role model like that that's not only a good listener, but available, interested, and willing to speak truth into a child's life was incredibly impactful for me.
Well, I'd like to say that we look at it as that grandparents can be the stabilizing roots in a family tree. They really can make a difference. Today, it is a little different. We have a lot of fractured families. We have a lot of families that are live far away from the grandparents. And Dan, you mentioned that your grandparents live far away from you. And a lot of people say, well, I can't be a grandparent then. Well, that's not true. You can still connect. And especially today with the wonderful communications we have, I'd like to tell you one story of one grandmother that I interviewed, and she said, well, she really felt bad that she couldn't be with her grandchild that was 10 years old. And somehow she decided, let's have a book club together. So the two of them got the same book. The little girl selected what book she wanted. And every Sunday night they'd meet together and they'd talk about the characters in the book, and they were able to communicate. And probably two of the neatest things about that was the younger brother then decided, oh, that's pretty neat. How about Grandpa having a book club with me? Which they did, which is wonderful. And because of Faithful Grandparenting, our book that came out, we have found that there are people now that are going to be using it for their book clubs, the adult book clubs, because everybody likes to talk about grandparenting, whether it's their grandparent they had or their grandparent they want to be or the grandparent they are.
I love, Carol, how you talked about it. It's not about being right there in the same area code, but it's being in their lives. I myself had the same experience maybe Becky did. In one sense, my grandparents, like Dan, didn't live that. They lived states away, but we called them and talked to them every week. And back in the 60s, hey, it was pretty expensive to actually call people.
That was good. That was wonderful.
Yeah. But I did see her write in her Bible and pray for the entire family. And she would be, if she's still alive, if she was still alive today, she'd be 100 and something. But I just cherish what she deposited into my life in so many ways. And she was, in Pennsylvania and me in the South. So thank you for breaking that barrier, because sometimes I think that's true. I think there's a barrier there. Well, I'm not close. I can only do so much. But I love that idea of being involved. What have you taken away from what have parents said about this? I would imagine that parents are delighted to have their parents involved with their kids in that way.
The book has been more successful than we thought it would be. There has been this push for parents to buy it as a Christmas gift for their own parents. Yeah. We've had preschools step up and buy multiple copies to send home for families, to pull that intergenerational piece in so that the grandparents are involved. The grandparents do see how they can be involved in novel ways. And I think especially coming out of COVID now and being so secluded and so isolated, people have found alternative ways to converse with one another, to connect one another. How are some ways that they have found to be together, initially enhanced with ideas from the book and in novel ways? The book club, you talked to your grandmother on the phone, and which I did too. And she only lived 40 miles away, but it was far enough where, the phone was great. But what are other ways? Text messaging, FaceTime. All of these things. We have some pretty tech-savvy grandparents out there. Carol is amazing. She and her husband are online. They're doing all sorts of things. And I think you can take advantage of all of those things and really to connect.
Again, I'd like to add too that one part of faithful grandparenting is the idea that there's a transcension. And I see that as sometimes difficult for parents. They've been a parent, they've been in control. They're the ones who plan the calendar and all the things that go into the family unit. And then all of a sudden they're a grandparent. And that transition from being in charge to being more of a cheerleader, but not, and here again, it depends upon the family. Some families, you need to be just a cheerleader. That's all they want. They want you to be there for them. And then there are other families that are rather needy in some way or another. And so you have to go with the family that you're working with, and yet you can be so instrumental in bringing them to the Lord, and also in giving them a great deal of joy for having a family.
Definitely. Carol, with your 8, tell us some of the fun things you do to keep up with your grandkids, or have them keep up with you, I guess.
I tell you, I'm very fortunate that I'm physically more able than my grandparents were. And I think all grandparents today are. My grandchildren are very active, but they're all very different. One thing that we always do every Christmas is we put on a Christmas pageant. Now, this we started years ago when we had live babies to baby Jesus. And we wanted someone, maybe a parent would read the story, and the children, I had very, very simple costumes, but the children would act out the part. And I loved it when one granddaughter, who I had no idea she knew this, she got up with her arms out and put on her angel set and said, "Glory be to God in the highest." And I thought, wow, it's fun. And as the children got older, they started writing their own. And some of them had musical instruments that they would play. And anyway, the whole Christmas story became part of what they do. And I'm just hoping that maybe when they now have children or grandchildren, that will continue on.
That's great.
Guys, thank you so much for your time in writing this book. And we would like to get with you in 2022, somewhere around February and March. I have a few more questions, but we're out of time. The book is called Faithful Grandparenting, Practical Ideas for Connecting Generations. Becky Danielson and Carol Olsen there. Great books for Christmas. You heard it. Hey, give it to your mom and dad, the grandparents for Christmas. I think that's perfect. FaithfulGrandparenting.com, the place to go to. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.